Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen across our beautiful country of Canada, our friends around the world, in the known and unknown universe. Welcome back to your favorite Angry Canadian on April 27, 2024.
The sense of election is that if the leadership proves to be bad, must be replaced. That's so simple.
Election time around the world. Man, Europe is going to have a election. Canada has one in a year. U.S. is having everyone is municipal elections across B.C. And what choice do we, the people, have? Not only in Canada, but in Europe, U.S. Look at the candidates they put forward, and we wonder why the fuck the world is going down the shitter. This person, along with his co-conspirators, should all be instantly fucking arrested and put on public trial, because the crookedness that has happened in Canada has brought our downfall to everyone. And then this whiny biatch, what is she doing there? What is she in Parliament for? Get her away. Like I said, they should all be arrested, put on public trial, because the bullshit that's been going on globally with these neoliberal people who want to have, well, what gender do you want to be? Well, I'm kind of partial to being what I was born. Oh, you can't do that. You gotta become whatever you want to be, but you gotta choose the right pronoun. Maybe it should be sir, madam, pumpkin, kitty, whatever pronoun. Pick it. But that's not the same everywhere. And I am so damn proud of my country where I was born, that they stand up against Europe, the US, everyone for freedom.
Now let's look at the EU and its Hungarian headache. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban is on the war path again. And his latest target is Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission. Orban's Hungary is the rebel among the EU member states. It's the closest to Russia, distrusts Ukraine, and opposes most of the EU's policies on issues ranging from migration to rights for the LGBTQ community. Viktor Orban has been at loggerheads with the EU over all these issues and more.
I am deeply convinced that we must say no to the Brussels model of Europe. We have to say no because it is unsustainable. It has no future. I am convinced that today Brussels is destroying Europe and is leading it to its demise. They put a new nail into its coffin every day.
Probably not many of you followed that, but they created a new financial system, which is a perfect instrument to blackmail countries who do not behaving well on ideological sense. And therefore, countries like Hungary and Poland before were literally blackmailed financially to give up our policy on migration, on gender, on traditional values, and so on. That's a huge change. So it's an attempt to suffocate Hungary and Poland previously financially. So we have to react on that. If you are attacked internationally that high level, you have to be more active. That's one of the reasons why Hungary is more active internationally than we were previously. The second is that something bad is going on here in Brussels and in the European Union. During the leadership of Ursula von der Leyen, the whole political commission became more and more politicized. And they started to behave not as guardian of the treaty, but as a political actor. And that brings the European Union at the verge of freedom and oppression, like the yesterday's story exactly exemplified where we are. So we have to fight for freedom more in Europe. So that's make us more active. And the third one is that there are some news from Western countries of an everyday suppression. That if a normal worker in his working location just make a remark about anti-migration, anti-gender, against the war, he can lose very easily his job. It's not a high-level political discussion, it's an everyday, we use the term everyday fascism, everyday communism. It's an everyday oppression, which is growing in many countries of European Union. So those who fight for freedom or fought for freedom as we did, we have to be active again. So what was our decision? This is the case. We should create a kind of conservative civic society for all the conservatives who would like to fight for freedom. And Hungary is a proper place for that. Because very difficult to define what's going on in Hungary, Leftists try to do it in a very ugly way, define what the hell is going on in Hungary, but we can say one thing surely, that if you look at Europe today, it's a kind of progressive liberal ocean. And that is an island, a country which does differently. So Hungary is the island of difference at this moment in Europe, which is a proper place for the conservatives to come, speak freely, to discuss, and probably plan some common political action for the future. So this is the change. So self-defense, danger of democracy, danger of freedom, and a good example of Hungary, which can be helpful to create a kind of conservative civic society, if it is intellectually not too controversial.
So think about this. Hungary is a very small, landlocked country, and it is standing up for freedom. It is standing up for rights. It is standing up for self-fucking determination. It's our country. We decide what goes on in there. It's not going to be Ursula von der Leyen from Brussels, who Canada just, oh man, they adored her when she came to the parliament to talk. Bitch, get the fuck out of here. Yeah, I'm an angry Canadian. I'm angry because I see what's happening in the world, and so many people are oblivious to it. And even if they see it, oh well, whatever. They were having a conference in Brussels, the conservatives, Hungarian conservatives, the Fidesz party. Nothing bad going on. It's just a talk. Well, they didn't allow that Greek minister in. I can't think of his name. They shut down the conference. Freedom? Where's the fucking freedom in a democratic country when they're so scared of what people say that they shut down a conference?
Police in Brussels attempted to shut down a gathering of hard-right nationalist European politicians. The National Conservatism Conference had just kicked off, with Brexit Party founder Nigel Farage addressing the audience when a police officer ordered it to stop.
The authorities have decided to shut off the event, and I'm here to signify you the decision. So I have the papers here, and I'm here to enforce the decision. So it's a decision of the burgomaster, the mayor, to shut off the event. So it is, the motivation lies within, and you have different articles that explain the decision.
The decision was taken by Emir Kir, the mayor of Saint-Just-Tenod, a municipality in Brussels. One of the reasons was the fear of a counter-protest organised by anti-fascist groups. Police surrounded the venue and prevented anyone from entering, including keynote speakers such as Member of the European Parliament Patricia Chagnon and the leader of the French political party Reconquête, Éric Zemmour.
Normalement, en Europe, nous avons inventé la liberté d'expression, quelle que soit cette expression. C'est bien pour ça qu'on appelle ça la liberté d'expression. Sinon, si on est là à juger qui a le droit de parler et qui n'a plus le droit de parler, ça s'appelle une discrimination.
Attendees decided to stay inside the venue, allowing the conference to continue. Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo has condemned the police intervention as unacceptable. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban and former Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, who were both among the speakers, also weighed in with criticism.
We were supposed to present our views on some other conference, but this was under such a pressure, and still is, under such a censorship type of approach that last time I saw such a censorship was in the communist times. I can tell you.
The think tank that organised the event legally challenged the decision, claiming freedom of speech was under attack. The anti-fascist counter-protest that had sparked police intervention took place in the afternoon with less than 100 participants.
This is what's happening in Canada. It's what's happening in the Western world. They want to shut down voices who don't tote the line. That's simple. And how dare the leftist, the left, the liberal, globalist say that conservatives is far right. Far right. You know, they don't do what we tell them. Oh man, you know, we got to set them straight. We got to outlaw them. That's it. That's the freedom we're going to give the people. You will have the political party that we recommend, we support, and the rest, they can just go to hell. Well, not Orban.
What are the key issues that conservatives and nationalists should be looking out for in this political campaign? What is at stake? What are the key issues?
Okay, first let's clarify the job. So I'm a doer. I'm not a man to provide intellectual ideas. That's your job, probably. So my job is just to do the political decisions. And if I approach this question of the election from that point, the sense of this European election is change the leadership. What is election for? The sense of election is that if the leadership proves to be bad, must be replaced. That's so simple. And this leadership of European Union is simply bad. It's failed. So it's not just a political statement, it's very much factual. So it's a leadership as in every country. They selected certain issues in the last 5 years, and they promised that they will manage that issues. Let's say, green transition. Green transition is failed. Not properly engineered, so they have to recalculate again. Agriculture, they promised a better agriculture, and now the farmer community is suffering all around Europe. They said competitiveness will be improved in these 5 years. The competitiveness of Europe is declining. They said that they will stop and manage somehow the migration crisis. Migration crisis is bigger than earlier. Then they said that they will introduce some sanctions to stop the war, Ukrainian-Russian war. The war is going on. So if a leadership promising something, let's say 5 or 6 important points for the community, and fail to deliver, they have to leave. Go away. We need new leadership. That's the sense of election, politically speaking. Intellectually, it's a different issue. It's more complicated to find more conservative approach to the European institution and to find leaders who behave more, who deliver more respect to the national governments and to the nations of Europe. Don't neglect them as it was done in the last 5 years.
Okay. We have a debate among political theorists and scholars about what the best way to describe this new movement on the right is. And as you know, I think it's best described as nationalism, the defense of the idea of the independent national state. But there are many scholars and many journalists and even people who are active in our movement who prefer to use the word populism. I was wondering, what is your view of the use of the term populism? I think that you avoid it. Why?
First, may I have a remark on nationalism?
Yes.
Okay.
Of course.
So that in our language, in our culture, nationalism has a positive sense and positive meaning. But in West, it's not the case. Because in the West, and especially in Germany, they have an understanding of their political history that all the major crimes and bad things, catastrophe in their history was created by national level. And the international level was the solution. Look at like Nazism, yeah? In Central Europe, it's just the opposite. In our history, all problem was created by international communities, and the good answer was national reply, you know? So therefore, in our mind, nationalism is a solution, is a good answer, and a kind of good resistance against the empires. in order to save your sovereignty, independence, and so on. So, but at the same time, the international arena, especially because of the overwhelming impact of liberal press, if you say nationalism, you are a dead man. Because nationalism, liberal interpretation, is the neighbor of fascism and feudalism, so awful things. So therefore we created a kind of replacement of national patriotism and all that kind, which is intellectually crazy anyway. So the proper definition is national. Okay, on populism, you know, I'm an old man, an old fox in the job, and I remember how was the intellectual level of the political discussions, let's say 30 years ago. Having discussion with Helmut Kohl, Jacques Chirac, even Tony Blair, you know. So the intellectual content, substance of the political discussions 20, 30 years ago was not like today, you know. Today everything is about a kind of fight of language. It does not matter what is the substance, because it has a political meaning of certain categories and you are bombed, you know, you are bombed. And populism is that kind of negative stigma which they use against you if the liberals don't like you. But if we try to be serious, what is populism about? Because originally it has a sense. It was not as publicly used as today. Populism was a well-known category saying that there are candidates for leadership who promising nice and good things, being aware that if they are in power, they will not be able to fulfill them. They will not be able to deliver. That was populism. But to be accused as a Hungarian prime minister is ridiculous. Because I promised popular things and I delivered all. That's not populism, that's politics, you know. So public security, I promised public security because there was a mess. Now there's a public security. I promised that 1 million more jobs will be created. It's done. I said that we will defend the families against gender propaganda. We did. We promised that we will stop the migration. We stopped, and so on and so on. It's not populism, it's politics. It's leadership, what we are doing.
Of course, there are some people that have a chip in their hand to get access to money. And of course, it's simply technology, but it's moving in that direction.
How easy it is to subvert a democracy. So people in America who believed it can never happen here were just deluding themselves, right? I mean, I knew the steps, that, like literally what that book points out is that whether they're on the left or on the right, tyrants always take the same 10 steps, and it always ends in martial law, emergency law, and often they use emergencies, you know, declare a state of emergency.
Yeah.
It can be a crisis of terrorism, it can be a crisis of public health, it can be a, you know, an environmental crisis, but you start with an emergency. But I didn't realize till after 2020, the veil was pulled away, and I saw that overnight, and this is why I think there really is something, I don't think we're living in normal human history anymore as of 2020. I think we're living in some sort of post-human history, some sort of biblical or metaphysical history in which the laws of history have changed. And I'll tell you why I think that. But suddenly overnight, hospitals were no longer devoted to saving lives. They were administering remdesivir and the equivalent in Britain to hasten deaths. They were euthanizing people at industrial scale. You know, in Canada, they introduced a suicide program, and it expanded and expanded.
A suicide program?
Oh yeah, it's called MAID, M-A-I-D. It's a euthanasia program where you just call a number and the state comes and helps you kill yourself. The BBC and the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, you know, and the Guardian were lying about many aspects of the pandemic. Never before have you had a situation in which pretty much every head of state in pretty much every country around the world read the same script and rolled out the same procedures and the same dicta in real time, step by step by step. Never before, and I didn't understand the role of AI, now I do, in journalism, but never before was the same story being told in 200 languages around the world of don't hug grandma because you're going to kill grandma, or don't go to Thanksgiving, don't go to Ramadan, don't go to Easter, right, because you'll kill the people around you. Pandemic, and especially with the work of the Pfizer documents volunteers, which was like opening the gates of Bergen-Belsen, right? It was like one report after another showing that Pfizer knew, meaning the FDA knew, meaning the CDC knew, meaning the White House knew, the president knew, that these injections were killing people, disabling people, sterilizing people, murdering people, injuring the hearts of children, and that the knowledge that they would do so went back 10 years, right?
You truly think that this is done deliberately?
I will restate, because I know it's a big concept. There is no other conclusion to reach from having read the 96 reports my volunteers have created based on the primary source documentation in the Pfizer documents. Pfizer knew from 1 month after rollout of the injections that they didn't work to stop COVID. The third most common side effect is COVID in the Pfizer documents, and the internal Pfizer documents conclude vaccine failure and failure of efficacy. Pfizer knew that lipid nanoparticles have been known for 10 years to degrade both male and female's reproductive capacity. The Pfizer documents, it's a respiratory infection, arguably, right? But there's nothing about lungs and breathing in the Pfizer documents, like literally nothing. It's all about sex and reproduction. And so in the Pfizer documents, they keep charts of how many tens of thousands of women they know they ruined their menstrual cycles in horrific ways. Like, these women bleed every day. These women lost their cycles altogether and have no, they can't have children. These women,
You found records of that?
Oh, abundant records. They knew that in April of 2021, the White House knew, and we FOIA'd these emails, that the injections were injuring the hearts of minors, myocarditis and pericarditis. And instead of coming forward and telling everyone and stopping the mandates, they created a crisis communications meeting with all of the most senior people on the chain, including the president's staff, and they covered it up with a script that is 17 pages fully redacted, and they told us it was safe and effective and to inject our minors for the whole rest of that year.
My message to unvaccinated Americans is this: what more is there to wait for? What more do you need to see?
God.
We've made vaccinations free, safe, and convenient. The vaccine has FDA approval. Over 200 million Americans have gotten at least one shot. We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin, and your refusal has cost all of us. So please do the right thing. But just don't take it from me. Listen to the voices of unvaccinated Americans who are lying in hospital beds, taking their final breath saying, if only I'd gotten vaccinated. If only. It's a tragedy. Please don't let it become yours.
Kind of meta-national
secret society,
alliance. I mean, it's not that secret. They put their plans out there. I mean, Carl Schwab wrote a book about this time. The World Health Organization has a treaty that's been widely covered that will drain sovereignty of our nation states.
So in fact, a kind of a cartel.
A cartel is a better term. It's not a cabal. It's an alliance of people with bad motivations who are structuring their actions in coordination with each other. And you are suffering it here in Europe as well, because your public health officials from the United Kingdom to the Netherlands to France to Germany took their orders from the World Health Organization, took their scripts from the World Health Organization. Your doctors are being expected to repeat falsehoods about safe and effective injections and not tell their patients what the dangers are. And when their patients come to them with vaccine injuries, they're not even allowed to say this is likely to be a vaccine injury. They delicensed doctors who dared to warn their patients. So I guess what I'm trying to say is at the very top, you have to sell your soul. People get bribed or threatened. And we see it all the way down to local public health officials, local police. I mean, the police in New York City, but they were bound by the governor. You know, they were bound by the police commissioner. So
it's rippling down.
It's rippling down.
But
so I can tell you exactly what their end goal is. So in the Pfizer documents, it shows 46,000 adverse events in 3 months. And of those, 36,000 are in the United States. The next tranche, and you'll appreciate this, the next group of adverse events is in Western Europe in order of political importance of the country. So Germany, France, Britain, Italy, Spain, Greece, right? Proportionately down the line. And then all the rest of the world combined, 52 countries, add up to only 7,000 adverse events. Now, it's very easy to make this injection more or less lethal or disabling based on very simple things like brand, with Moderna more than 3 times more toxic than Pfizer, for instance. I don't know about AstraZeneca or what you're using in the Netherlands. And even things like storage and temperature, because with warmer temperatures, it thickens. And with body temperature, it thickens, right? So it creates blood clots. So my point is, look at what's happening. You're getting classes of people injured or dropping dead. You're getting 50 Austrian mayors in the peak of health in their 50s dropping dead. You get 65 doctors in Canada dropping dead. You get athletes and comedians, leaders, right, actors dropping dead. You get the royal family, cancer, right, of Britain. So, and then compare that with, and 1 million people in the United States a month, according to Ed Dowd, the BlackRock hedge fund manager, former BlackRock hedge fund manager, who's tabulating government databases and insurance databases. 1 million people are identifying as disabled every month in the United States. I can't escape what I know about the intentionality of this, because so many people, the FDA waved it right through. Like, I was deplatformed in June of 2021 for an accurate tweet, accurately noting that women were reporting menstrual symptoms. That's a primary piece of evidence, a woman's eyewitness report of her own body. Point is, when you're asking about intentionality, that early, not only was I deplatformed, but there was this global smear campaign against my reputation. I found out through my lawyer recently that the people who did that were the White House, the CDC, the Department of Homeland Security, the Bureau of the Census, with Twitter and Facebook on the CC. They were leaning on Twitter and Facebook with my little tweet that could have saved millions of women's health and lives and millions of babies. And they were saying we have to put out a BOLO, meaning be on the lookout for material like this. And then my career was upended. I became a non-person. I couldn't publish anymore. I was called crazy in every news outlet that had published me for 35 years. That was the White House. That was my White House. So if they didn't have a plan to do this, why would they have done that in 2021? Why smear someone who's calling attention to something that would sterilize millions of women unless they wanted to sterilize millions of women? You would never think that could happen, right? And if you were never a Native American who received blankets that had smallpox in them, which really happened, right? You would never think that would happen. And if your ancestors were never turned into soap, in places not so far away from here, you would never think human beings would do that, right? In every generation, we need to learn anew that these things can happen. And so I guess I just want to say, please wake up, because not only is this genocidal impulse alive and well and active since 2020, they have new technologies to scale it around the world, digital and pharmaceutical technologies.
As a young man, you lived under communism. And I think you heard, I heard you mention that some of the things that we're seeing now are, remind you a little bit of communism. Is if you think about this seriously, is it true? We thought we defeated the Marxists with the fall of the Berlin Wall. Do you think it's coming back? Is there something to that?
Okay, how was the end of the communism? That was one of the nicest periods of my life. To push down the communists and push the Soviet Union out of the country, that was really a joy. How did it happen? So, like just yesterday here, we established Fidesz in '88 as an anti-communist young political organization. And we started to organize meetings. And, you know, it was in the second part of the 80s, '88, so it was obvious that it's not as a harsh dictatorship as it was earlier. So some movement has a chance to survive, not that we were not imprisoned and so on, but they did everything not to happen, the free expression of our opinion. So we rented a place in Budapest, and just several hours prior to the meeting, it was said that unfortunately it's not available anymore. And then we looked for another one, and they said that if the runner of the place would supply us with some beer and some food, he will be out of the business, you know. So the same kind of pressure technologies which you have experienced here was very common in the second part of the 80s in Hungary. But finally we won. So I think the problem is probably intellectually, Professor, that political leaders discussing too much on political systems, democracy, authoritarian, mix, blah, blah, blah. But the main question is freedom. Whatever you characterize a political system, the question is oppression versus freedom. And I think freedom in Europe, and especially in Brussels, is in danger. As just yesterday, it was shown. So, whether you call it communism or not, we are living in the verge of freedom and oppression in Europe, in the Western civilization. And we have to fight for the freedom. So that's what I can say, that those who love freedom must be united and fought against the forces of oppression, ideologically, politically, the legal system, and so on and so on. So freedom is a serious fight now in Europe again.